I'm 87 years old. My kids don't miss me. They miss my money. I know that for a fact now. I tested them. Let me tell you what happened. It started when I was just a bricklayer. I met Eleanor in 1958. I had dirt under my nails and dreams in my pocket. She saw the man, not a bank account. We built this house with our own hands. We had 2 kids, David and Lisa. We didn't have much. I remember Lisa's 10th birthday. Her gift was a homemade doll from Eleanor. She hugged it like it was gold. We were rich in ways that had nothing to do with money. You see, that was the foundation. Then everything shifted. I got lucky in the 70s. A business I invested in took off. Suddenly, we were wealthy. Eleanor worried it would change us. She was right. The first crack came at David's college graduation. He introduced me to his friends as the bankroll. He said it like a joke, but his eyes weren't laughing. I paid off his loans that day. The dynamic was set. Lisa's wedding was next. It was a lavish affair. The price tag was the main thing she thanked me for. The money became a tool, then a crutch, then a wall. Eleanor was the glue. When cancer took her 5 years ago, the wall got taller. The family gatherings kept happening, but they felt like business meetings. David and Lisa would come over. Their talk was a checklist: my health, the house, my will. The grandkids texted for concert tickets or car down payments. Eleanor's chair was empty. It screamed. All I heard from my kids was the echo of their own plans. I felt so lonely. So last month, I decided to run a test. I had to know if my suspicion was just an old man's paranoia. I called them with a story. I told David and Lisa separately that I'd made a bad investment. I said a big part of my money was gone. I used a shaky voice. The silence on David's end was colder than winter. Lisa's first words were, "How much is left? Do we need to sell the house?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I'm sorry, Dad." They showed up within days. They didn't bring food. They brought spreadsheets and a lawyer's name. That was my answer. That night, I made my real decision. I went to see my lawyer, Frank. I told him to draw up new papers. When I die, my estate gets liquidated. Every last cent goes to 2 places. One is the local community college's trades program. It helps kids like the bricklayer I once was. The other is the hospice that cared for Eleanor. Signing those papers, it felt like laying the final, honest brick of my life. I was resolute. But I couldn't just leave it there. I had to see their faces when they found out. I invited them for a family meeting. The tension was thick. David talked about market volatility. Lisa hinted at private school for her son. I let them talk. Then I told them. I explained about the college and the hospice. The color drained from their faces. Lisa sputtered. "But your legacy..." David stood up so fast his chair screeched. He said, "You're giving our inheritance to strangers after everything?" I felt completely detached. Their outrage was a performance. I was done watching. So I asked them the question I'd held for decades. I looked at them. Their faces were twisted in betrayal. I said, "When was the last time you missed me?" I made it clear, not my money, not my house, me, the man who taught David to fish, who held Lisa's hand after her first heartbreak. When did you last call just to hear my voice? The silence was absolute. They couldn't make up an answer. David stared at the floor. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. But they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of furious calculation failing. That silence was my final answer. They left, slamming doors. In the quiet after, I didn't feel angry. I felt a strange, sad clarity. The next week was the most peaceful I've had in years. The phone didn't ring. The pressure was gone. I looked through old photo albums, not pictures of fancy vacations, pictures of picnics, Christmases with handmade ornaments. I found one of me teaching David, he was 6, how to lay a straight line of bricks. He was beaming, covered in mortar. I was just his dad. That was the man they lost. They lost him long before they'll lose my money. I felt a deep melancholy. Then my peace was interrupted. An unexpected visitor came. She offered a perspective I hadn't considered. It was my granddaughter, Chloe, Lisa's daughter. She came alone. She didn't ask for a thing. She brought her own tea bags because she remembered I like Earl Grey. We sat in the kitchen. She said, "Mom and Uncle David are furious, but I think I get it." She told me she felt trapped by their constant talk of money and expectations. Then she said, "I miss Grandma's laugh, and I miss the stories you used to tell." Listen, when she said that, for the first time through all this, I cried. It was cathartic. That visit changed something. It didn't fix the past, but it offered a thread to a possible future. I called Frank again. I didn't change the main will. The money will still go where it can do real good. But I set up a small, separate trust for Chloe. It's only for education or starting a business. A hand up, not a handout. For David and Lisa, I wrote letters, not about money, about the memories their silence has cost us. I forgave them in those letters, not for their sake, for my own peace. I released the last of my bitterness. I finally felt accepting. So here I am. This is my confession. Love gets tangled in the material. Sometimes you have to burn the ledger to see the people clearly. My children may never miss me, but I have finally learned to miss the man I was before the money, and to cherish the fragments of real connection that remain, like my tea with Chloe. To anyone listening, especially if you have wealth or aging parents, audit your heart. Measure your conversations. Are you building a relationship or just managing an asset? That is the only inheritance that doesn't fade. That is the only inheritance that doesn't fade. You see, after I wrote those letters to David and Lisa, I mailed them. I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't get one. The silence stretched on, but it was a different kind of quiet now. It wasn't the heavy, waiting kind. It was just empty. clean. I started going through the house room by room, not to pack anything away, but just to remember. I found an old toolbox in the garage. My original trowel was still in there, the handle worn smooth from my grip. I held it and I could feel my hands, young and strong, mixing mortar. I could smell the dust and the sweat. For a minute, I wasn't an old man in a big, quiet house. I was a builder. That's who I was. That's who Eleanor fell for. Then, about 3 weeks after the dinner, David called. His voice was tight, like a coiled spring. He didn't mention the letter. He said, "We need to talk about this will situation, Dad. It's not right. You're not thinking clearly." I told him I'd never thought more clearly in my life. He said Mom would be heartbroken. That felt like a punch, using her like that. I said your mother was heartbroken the day you called me your bankroll. She just never told you. The line went quiet. Then he hung up. It hurt, but it was a clean hurt, like pulling out a splinter. Lisa showed up the next day. She didn't call first. She just rang the bell. She had her son, my grandson Jake, with her. He's 15. He looked uncomfortable, staring at his shoes. Lisa's eyes were red. She said, "We need to talk, privately." I said, "Jake can stay. He's family." We went to the living room. Lisa didn't sit. She paced. She said I was tearing the family apart. She said I was being cruel. She said, "What about Jake's future, his college?" I looked at Jake. I asked him, "What do you want to study?" He shrugged and mumbled, "Maybe engineering." I said that was a fine thing. Lisa cut in. "See, he needs support." I told her the community college has a great engineering pathway. That's when she started to cry, real tears of frustration. She said, "Why are you doing this to us?" I said, "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just finally stopping." She took Jake and left. Jake gave me a little wave from the door. A small thing, but it mattered. That night I felt tired, a deep, bone-tired. Not from sickness, from the weight of it all finally being lifted. I sat in Eleanor's chair. I talked to her. I said, "I think I messed it all up, Ellie. I let the money build the walls. I should have torn them down." In my heart, I knew she'd say I was doing that now. It was just 50 years too late. The real surprise came a few days later. It was Frank, my lawyer. He came to the house, which he never does. He had a folder. He looked serious. He said, "There's been a development. Your children have retained counsel. They're exploring a competency challenge." He explained it. They were going to try to say I wasn't in my right mind when I changed the will, to get a judge to say I couldn't make my own decisions. Frank said it was a long shot, but they were going to try. I just listened. I felt cold. Then I felt nothing. When Frank left, I stood at the big window in the living room. I watched the sunset. I thought, my own children. They'd rather tell the world their father is a crazy old fool than admit they forgot how to love him. That was the bottom. That was the loss. Not of the money, but of them, for good. That was the bottom. That was the loss. Not of the money, but of them, for good. I sat in the dark for a long time. I didn't cry. I just felt hollowed out. Frank called the next morning. He said not to worry, that he'd fight it. I told him not to. I said, let them try. I think he was shocked, but I meant it. If they wanted to drag their father into court to call me incompetent in front of a judge, then let them. I had nothing left to protect. My own name? They were the ones tarnishing it. My dignity? I'd already lost that in their eyes years ago. I decided to go see the places I was leaving the money to. I drove to the community college first. I walked through the trades building, the smell of sawdust and welding, the sound of drills, kids in work boots focused on their projects. I saw a young man laying bricks. His line was crooked. Without thinking, I walked over. I said, your mortar's too dry. He looked surprised. I showed him. I took his trowel, my hands shaking, and fixed the mix. I laid 3 bricks, slow and careful. My hands remembered. The kid watched. He said, you know what you're doing. I said, I used to. For a second, I wasn't a lawsuit. I was a teacher. I was useful. Then I went to the hospice. I sat in the quiet garden where Eleanor spent her last days. A nurse came out. She remembered me. She asked how I was. Just that. How was I? Not what I owned. I broke down then, right there on the bench. I told her about the lawsuit. I said, my children think I'm crazy. She put a hand on my shoulder. She said, grief makes people do terrible things. They're grieving the loss of an idea, the idea of your money. She said, you're grieving the loss of an idea too, the idea of them. That was it exactly. I went home. The letter was in the mailbox, official looking, from their lawyer. It outlined the competency challenge. It used words like undue influence and diminished capacity. It said they were acting out of concern. I read it twice. Then I called David. He answered, his voice weary. I said, I got the papers. He was quiet. I said, do you really believe I'm not in my right mind? He didn't answer. I said, tell me the truth, David, as my son. Do you believe I've lost my mind? The silence stretched. Then he said, it doesn't matter what I believe, Dad. This is the process. That was his answer. That's when I realized what I'd done. I hadn't just failed to teach them about love. I'd failed to teach them about courage. The courage to tell the truth, even an ugly one. I hung up. I felt broken, but a clean break. I knew what I had to do. I called Frank. I told him to set up a meeting with David, Lisa, their lawyer, and him. A settlement conference. I was going to give them one last chance, not for the money, for the truth. The meeting was in Frank's office. It felt like a courtroom. David and Lisa were there with a young, sharp-suited lawyer. They wouldn't look at me. Their lawyer did all the talking. He laid out their concerns. He talked about my age, my isolation, my sudden, radical decisions. I let him finish. Then I looked past him at my children. I said, drop the challenge today, and I will do something for you. Lisa's eyes flickered with that old calculation. I said, I will put 5% of the estate back into a trust for you. Not a lot, but something, on one condition. David leaned forward. What condition? I said, you both sit here with me for 1 hour, no lawyers, and you tell me one true thing, one real memory you have of me from before the money that doesn't have a price tag attached to it. Just one, from when you were kids. Their lawyer started to object, but I held up my hand. I was looking only at them. You do that, and the challenge disappears, and you get the 5%. You can't do it, then we go to court, and you can explain to a judge and to the world why you're doing this to your father. The silence was terrible. Lisa looked at David. David studied the grain of the conference table. The lawyer was whispering to them. Finally, David spoke, his voice rough. The fishing trip, when I was 8. I caught that tiny sunfish and you told me it was a marlin. You made up a whole story about the deep sea. He didn't look up. You bought me an ice cream after, even though Mom said I hadn't eaten my dinner. I nodded. It was something. It was real. I looked at Lisa. Her face was pale. She was twisting a tissue in her hands. She whispered, the dollhouse. You built it for me from scraps of wood from the job site. It was lopsided. The paint was all wrong. I loved it more than anything. She finally met my eyes. I don't know what happened to it. That was it. That was the truth. It was messy and sad, and it was all we had. I looked at Frank and nodded. Draw it up. 5%. The challenge is withdrawn. I stood up. My legs were shaky. I said to David and Lisa, the money you'll get won't change your lives. But those memories you just dug up, hold on to them. They're worth more, and you almost let them rot. I walked out. So here's what I learned, sitting here in this quiet house. I was wrong. For decades I was wrong. I thought providing was loving. I thought writing a check was the same as showing up. When David called me his bankroll, I should have sat him down. I should have said, that hurt me. But I was proud. I was the successful father. I paid the loans to prove a point, not to teach a lesson. I bought the lavish wedding instead of asking, what do you and the man you love actually want? I traded presents for presents. I built them a world of things and then wondered why they only saw the things. Eleanor knew. She always knew. She tried to tell me, but I was too busy building the empire to hear her. The greatest failure of my life wasn't that my children grew up to value my money. It's that I taught them to. I was the first one who put a price on everything. My advice, especially to folks my age, to anyone with some wealth or with grown children, is this. Don't perform. Just be there. Be boring. Be present. Talk about the weather. Listen to their complaints about work. Share a dumb joke. The big gestures, the checks, they cast long shadows that can hide the person writing them. Have the hard conversations now. If you feel like a wallet, say it. It'll be uncomfortable. It might cause a fight. But a fight is a connection. Silence is a burial. And for God's sake, tell your stories. Not the ones about the big deal you closed, but the ones about the time you got lost, or failed, or were scared. Show them your cracks. That's where they'll see you're human. That's where they might connect. There is hope. It doesn't look like a fairy tale reunion. It looks like a 5% trust and 2 fragile, painful memories salvaged from the wreckage. It looks like a granddaughter who brings her own tea bags. It looks like peace, even if it's a lonely peace. You still have time. Maybe not years to fix it all, but you have now. And now is enough to stop the damage. It's enough to be honest. It's enough to change the ending, even if the middle chapters are already written. My story with David and Lisa is mostly over, but my story with myself and with Chloe and with the kid at the college who learned to lay a brick, that's still being written. And it's finally a story I'm not ashamed of. If this story sat with you, if it made you think of your own family, your own ledger, then maybe it was worth telling. I'm just an old man talking into a machine, but if my words found you, then do something with them. Don't just let them sit. If you felt something, hit that like button. It lets me know this wasn't just whispered into the void. Subscribe if you want to hear more truths. Hard and plain as an old brick. Turn on notifications so you don't miss them. But more importantly, go to the comments. Tell me your story. Did this ring true for you? Are you the parent feeling like an ATM? Or the child who doesn't know how to bridge the gap? Share a piece of it. Let's talk about it. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, a friend, a sibling, a parent, share this with them.